By way of review, what are the important things we've talked about so far from last week? Pardon me? Hannah had a baby. What else? That would be my first one. What else? What other significant things? Okay, we've got a baby that's been dedicated. What else? Okay, her prayer of gratefulness. We see her modeled there in chapter 2. What else? What else in chapter 2? Okay, she had other children, several of them. And what about them? What? I asked for it. What's said about them? Anybody? What's said about them? Okay, they didn't know the Lord, and what is going to happen to them? They're going to die. Judgment has been pronounced upon them. Okay? So if there were two things that I would say so far that we've talked, if we'd sum it up, we've got a baby who's going to be incredibly important, and as I said 2 weeks ago, he's a big deal. So big of a deal that I had failed to remember this, but he is actually referenced in Hebrews chapter 11. Okay, that's pretty good company to be included in. Okay, that's kind of the hall of faith there if you don't know that chapter. And then we have judgment pronounced on the ruling party of the nation of Israel and what's going to come out of them. Okay, so I think that the second one is vitally important to understand because we're going to see how that plays out this evening. So if you've got your Bibles handy, let's go ahead. We're going to pick up in chapter 3, and I am going to do my absolute best to try and get us through chapter 6 tonight. I've got a plan to do it, but we'll see how well I can execute on that. So I think it's important, though. I do want to read chapters 3 and 4, so we're going to go ahead and read all of chapter 3 here in one setting, so that we kind of all have a perspective of what we're going to talk about tonight in the event that you did not get a chance to read it. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark was. Then the Lord called Samuel, and he said, "Here I am," and ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called for me." But he said, "I did not call. Lie down again." So he went and lay down. And the Lord called again, "Samuel," and Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call you, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time, and he rose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go, lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood, calling it as at other times, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant hears." Then the Lord said to Samuel, "Behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel at which the two ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever." Samuel lay until morning, when he had opened the doors of the house of the Lord, and Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. But Eli called Samuel and said, "Samuel, my son," and he said, "Here I am." And Eli said, "What is it that he told you? Do not hide it from me. May God do to you, and more also, if you hide anything from me of all that he told you." So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And he said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established as a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. So, what's the state of the nation right now as it's laid out right at the very beginning of chapter 3? What is the condition that Israel here finds themselves in as it relates to the Lord? Very first verse. Okay, there's been no activity. And I put up on here, basically they're in a spiritual famine at this point. Okay? It's significant enough that the writer points this out, which would be in contradiction to what they have experienced before. Okay? So clearly, we've got something going on here that is not a desirable scenario. Now, in verse 3, what is it that has not yet gone out? Okay, God's lamp. Now, in case you don't know this, the lamp would burn from morning until evening. Now, here in verse 3, the context is specifically speaking about the fact that the lamp of the Lord has not gone out. I do think that in the context that is very much referring to the physical lamp that is there in the ark. Okay. However, I don't think the writer puts that in there for just for any mundane reason. It is a reflection, I believe, of what he is saying about the people. We're in a spiritual famine, but because of one individual that we're about to get very acquainted with, the light of the Lord has not gone out yet. And so, there's hope. Okay? So, as we come in to this little story here, this chapter is one of the most famous in the book of 1 Samuel. It's right up there with David and Goliath. We teach it to our children in the children's classes, and everybody knows about the calling of Samuel. So, if you had to say anything about the calling, what would you say? And Theron's smiling. And that's kind of the reaction. What would you say? Huh? It is amusing, right? Samuel, here little Samuel, and we don't know how old he is here, right? I'd like to think that he's probably somewhere in his teenage years, but we don't know. And so he runs, go back to bed. Hey, Samuel. He runs, go back to bed. When we come to the last time, though, the fourth time, as I put up here, is a charm. Why did it take 4 times for Samuel and subsequently Eli to get the message? Why do you think? I've got. Okay, it's unexpected. That's absolutely correct. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. What else specifically related to Samuel? He hadn't heard it before. Well, there's a word, though, that is in there. He hadn't what? He hadn't heard it what? There's one little 3-letter word in there that's significant here. Yet. Okay? Now, I bring that up because I want to contrast that back to chapter 2 and verse 12. What was it said about, and I want to call him Phineas and Ferb, because once upon a time somebody did, Hophni and Phineas. What was it said about them in chapter 2, verse 12? Do what? They were worthless and they did not know God. Okay? And so here we begin to see this immediate juxtaposition between these two. We've got the ones who are the priests of the Lord. They do not know God. Samuel, he doesn't know the Lord yet. And I think that's absolutely significant when the writer puts that down there because it is a harbinger of things to come. So, what also about the fourth time is different from the first 3 when he calls him? Okay, that is true. Eli told him how to answer. But the one who's doing the calling, what is different in the text about the fourth time, verses 1 through 3? Do what? Okay, he came and stood, and we're gonna hit on that. What else? I put it up here for you. Calls his name twice. Okay? Now, why is that significant? Well, 3 times in Old Testament history that I've been able to find, there were 3 different occasions with 3 different people where God specifically, when he called them out, he referred to them by their name twice. First one, Abraham. Okay? When he's getting ready to sacrifice his son. Abraham, Abraham. When he reveals himself to Jacob, Jacob, Jacob. When he introduces himself to Moses in the burning bush, Moses, Moses. Okay? There seems to be a significance here when the Lord approaches somebody and he calls them out twice. It is a significant implication as to what's going on. Now, Phil brings up a good point here, and we've got it up here. What does it mean that he came and stood? What do you think it means? And I see some bobbing of heads. Okay. Who does the standing? Okay. Who do we think that might be? Which would be potentially who? Jesus. Okay. I point this out because in the very first class, when one of the things I talked about was, were we going to be able to see Jesus in the text? Okay, now we will see him woven through in types and antitypes. But this is my speculation. I had actually never noticed in the text until I started studying this time that the Lord is talked about coming and standing before Samuel. Okay, now we know that nobody can look upon the face of God or they're going to die. Okay, but yet we're told that the Lord comes and he stands. And so, again, this is speculation, but it might be that the one who's actually doing the calling is the pre-incarnate Christ. Okay? And the fact that it's in the same vein as these three other individuals throughout Old Testament history that are significant, this is a monumental moment that is getting ready to happen right here. And the reality of what is getting ready to happen is, Samuel, welcome to the ranks of the prophets. Okay? He is clearly establishing, by doing this calling and what is getting to be ready to be revealed to him, and the fact that the spiritual famine is coming to an end, Samuel is getting ready to take a place of preeminence in the eyes of the people and in his relationship to the people, and the fact that he is going to be their prophet, he is going to be their judge, and he is going to, in some instances, rule through his counsel with what takes place through the nation now from here on out through the rest of his life. Okay? So, it is the Lord. These are the words that Eli says. I wish that I could hear his tone of voice when he says this, right? Because Samuel's excited about giving him the news, right? I mean, this is the equivalent of going and telling your boss that you're going to get fired, right? I mean, this is news that he does not want to deliver. He wakes up, he starts doing his work there in the tabernacle area there, and he's kind of trying to avoid him. And Eli is perceptive enough to say, I want to hear everything. And when he says, it is the Lord, let him do what seems best, there's a part of me that wants him to be remorseful, reflective. There's another part of me that, was he nonchalant about it? Oh, well, it's the Lord. He's going to do whatever he wants, right? Maybe sometimes that's a reflection of us. But at the end of the day here, this had to be just incredibly difficult news for what is likely a very young man to deliver somebody that he probably holds in very high esteem. And so the question that I ask myself is what's the lesson there for us in this instance, right? How do we feel about delivering the word of the Lord to people that we know that are maybe in error? And these questions I ask myself. Does it make me feel vindicated or justified to call people out because of their sin? or what I see in the world. Again, it's not a complete apples-to-apples scenario. But clearly Samuel he's apprehensive about delivering the word of the Lord because he recognizes the judgment that it signifies. And I wrote down in here, I said we should never find it joy to level judgment against each other. And that's obviously within our group here, one to another. But I think it's also in how we see those on the outside, right? Again, just something that I took away in this scenario here of, what does this mean for me? What can I take away from this? So, any questions or comments about this particular section here? There's clearly more in here than just 4 times calling and here I am. Mike. Yeah, and again, it comes back to kind of what we talked about when we kicked this off 2 weeks ago, is this idea of leadership, right? Leadership, fathers to their children, leadership, elders in the flock. We're going to see here in the next chapter over what the elders, the judgments that they make. And so, yes, I think you're right. And it's going to kind of come back, unfortunately, to bite Samuel a little bit too, we're going to see. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's go ahead and get into chapter 4. And again, here, so the plan tonight is and when Jason and I talked about this, we really want to make this a study about the people, not necessarily just things moving from one location to another, right? We're studying people because that's where we gather our information from and what looks good, what doesn't look good, and around leadership. So 5 and 6 is going to be a breeze through tonight. We're going to spend most of our time here in 3 and 4. Okay, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. We're going to read this real quick. And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. They encamped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped at Aphek. I believe is how you say that. The Philistines drew up in line against Israel, and when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the battlefield. And when the people came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies." So the people went to Shiloh and brought from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. As soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout so that the earth resounded. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shouting, they said, "What does this great shouting in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" And when they had learned that the ark of the Lord had come to the camp, the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "A god has come into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us, who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness. Take courage and be men, O Philistines, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight." So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and they fled, every man to his home. And there was a great slaughter, for 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. And the ark was captured, and the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. Okay, so what do we got here? We got war. We don't know exactly why they're in this position that they're going to be going to war. What we do know is that they did not drive out the other nations when they settled the land like they should, and the Philistines are a thorn in their side basically for a significant portion of their early history. And it might be that they're going out to war simply for the fact is that they're trying to take over land maybe that they didn't have or the Philistines had taken from them. Okay, we don't know exactly why we're at this point of war. But they rally up the troops, they head out, and what happens? They get their tails handed to them. How many around the first time die? 4,000. So, what do? Come back, try and figure out what happened. And what did they say? Why did they lose the battle? This first battle. Is it because of something that they did? What's their summation? Okay, so in my opinion, they've got a pretty good understanding here, because for the most part, are they used to losing battles? They're really not. I mean, throughout most of the history, in many instances, they're a smaller army or they're not as capable, and yet the Lord delivers them. So they are used to winning battles, right? They are used to the Lord providing some form of help when they go to war, right? And so what do? We'll get the Lord to help us, right? Is that what they say? No. What do they do? And this blows my mind. The Lord's caused this defeat, so what are we going to do? We're going to go get the box. We're going to get the box because the box can save us. And who is it that makes this decision to do this? Is it the plebes on the battlefield? Do what? It's the elders. It's the ones who should know better, right? And so what do? We have this scenario where instead of the reverence that they should have for God and the respect that they should have for the ark, at best, they're flipping that, right? And I would even argue that they don't even have respect for God, right? Because what's going to save them? The box. Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. Now, and that's it, thank you for bringing that up. The reality is, where does God meet the people? Where is the spot that God meets the people when He comes to commune with them? Mercy seat. It's right up there above them two little what look like angels. Okay? That's His designated meeting place when He comes before the people. So there is a precedent set that when the Lord comes, He is there. That is His, what we'll call it, His seat of power when He's amongst the people, right? That's where He communes. So there is a precedent set that this box is pretty important, right? But let's be very clear here. And I say it as a box because that's all that is. That is a vessel to hold a couple of stone tablets, a jar of food, and a staff. That's all that is if who's not there? The Lord. Okay? And yet they put all of their attention on Him. So, what do? What kind of noise do they make? Great shout. They've got, everybody is hooping, got the war cry going. It's so big that the Philistines are like, we're going to die. Because the gods have now, this Hebrew God has shown up and we're about ready to have the tables turned on us. And yet what do the Philistines do? I love this. What do they tell each other? Be men. Stand strong. We're going to fight. Now, with that said, if the Lord wanted them defeated, it wouldn't matter how much they were manly in their activity, they would have been destroyed. But they celebrate all the way to the slaughter. How many people die in this second round? 30,000. What happens to the army? They're running scared. It probably says in your translation either every man went to his home or every man went to his tent. You know what that means? The army was disbanded. I mean, they're devastated. They're devastated on the battlefield, and everybody just goes running. Two people die. that are called out. Who are they? Phineas and Ferb. Hophni and Phinehas. Why did this happen? Because they didn't know the Lord and they had misplaced their faith in what? Do what? In an idol. To them. To them. Because the text clearly points out that they say, what's going to save us? Is it the Lord that's going to save us? No, it's the ark that's going to save us. And the minute that we substitute something the minute that we substitute something for God in our lives, in their lives, is the minute that that substitution becomes our God. Right? That's the lesson for us. We're not going to carry around a gold-covered box. But I ask myself, what is my box? What do I have trust in? Is it my bank account? My health insurance? Is it my job? What is my government? Something to think about. Again, this is a story of people, folks, and we're people, and we're just like them. If we're not careful, we'll have the same thing happen. David. Yep. 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 No, you're absolutely right. I agree 100%. Okay? I think we do have to be careful in being critical. I think the point of the story, though, is to point out when they have been defeated in the past, we know that they approached the Lord. What did we do wrong? And I think that's the misguided element here, is that they didn't go to the source of the power of the box, right? And again, it's to your point, it's Monday morning armchair quarterback. But why is it written for us? It's so that we can see this is not written as a history lesson, okay? This is written as something for us to look at and go, when they fail, what can I do to keep from making that same mistake in 21st century America? And I think that's the point, is what is our box, right? What's the golden box in our life? And so to your point, though, I'm not sitting in judgment on them. It's more of a pointing out where they went wrong. You softy. Probably. Lisa's Jim.
Yeah. So it might be in that they left it in Shiloh to begin with.
So what you're referring to is that when they take it as they're coming into the land, it is
Right.
what it is the Lord that is leading there.
The Lord leading them, and
Here's
they've kind of forgotten.
here's the issue though, and this is where because I went back and looked at this, what separated, what made the difference. The Lord was there with the ark at the
His
time,
presence.
and that's what's missing here. And so again, I'm not trying to Keith, I appreciate the fact that there is that element of compassion, and right, and but I think that they recognize who it is that's let them get defeated, but then they don't go to the source to say, hey, I mean, they've got Eli, they've got the priests. Beseech the Lord on our behalf, what can we do here? They take it upon themselves. And again, I'm not trying to say right, wrong, or indifferent. I think it's something that we can look at. I got Greg, and then Jeremy, and then Derek, I think you. Okay, and then I'm going to have to stop there because I got an agenda here. Yep. Yeah, and I think the Holy Spirit here is writing this because he's saying, don't be like this, right? I mean, I think that's the clear lesson here. Yep. Right. Okay. Okay. Verse 12. A man of Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes torn with dirt on his head. And it's about a 22-mile run from where the battle was back to Shiloh. When he arrived, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told the news, all the city cried out. When Eli heard the sound of the outcry, he said, what is this uproar? Then the man hurried and came and told Eli. Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were set so that he could not see. And the man said to Eli, I am he who came from the battle. I fled from the battle today. And he said, how did it go, my son? He who brought the news answered and said, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has also been a great defeat among the people. Your 2 sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured. As soon as he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for the man was old and heavy. He had judged Israel 40 years. Okay, why is his heart trembling? Why is his heart trembling? Okay, his heart is trembling because it says he's concerned about the ark. So here's the connection you have to make. His 2 sons and him likely would have been in direct oversight of the ark. Okay? And so being the Monday morning armchair quarterback, he should have known better than to let the ark go. And so he's concerned for it. What's all the noise about? How did it go? And it's interesting, 98 years old, how did it go, my son? Basically, get on with it, kid. Tell me what's going on. Okay, now the author here does something from a writing perspective to kind of build, right? And we see this when we tell a story. When you're wanting to have something significant and you've got multiple things, do you typically lead out with your biggest issue, the biggest thing that's going on? No. It's we did this and this happened, and boom, the punchline, okay? And so I put up here a punchline that leaves its mark. What's the first thing that happens? There are 4 things that happen here. What did Israel do? They ran. What's the next thing that's said? We've got to slaughter. What's the next thing that's said? Okay. Now, from my perspective, looking at this on the surface level, it couldn't get any worse than that, right? Here's a dad that is told that his 2 sons, no matter how much of a scoundrel they might have been, they were still his. And the news is brought that they're both dead. And yet the author is going to make the point that that's not the worst thing that happened this day. What's the next thing that happens as he ties off the story? Okay, he's told about the ark, right? And what is it? It's been captured, okay? Bad news brings an end to a 40-year career. I can't imagine trying to put yourself in his position what that was like, but it was miserable for him. Now, there's an interesting thing that's pointed out about him. What does it say about his physical appearance? He's heavy. Okay, now very rarely is something like that stated in Scripture, and so it causes you to stop and go, okay, why did they point that out? So, why did he die? Well, he dies because it appears that the weight of his body when he falls over, it causes his neck to break. And that in and of itself is sad, but the writer, lost to us in English, makes a play on words here. The word for heavy in Hebrew, when it's transliterated or spoken out loud, is kabed. The word for glory in Hebrew is kabod. Now, I equate this to, and David pointed this out when he did Ecclesiastes, the idea of we're under the sun. When we say we're all under the sun, what do we think? We're under that big old shiny thing up in the sky. But as he pointed out in that class, we're all under the sun, S-O-N, Jesus. And what the writer here that I believe is trying to show is that the glory that should have been God's is wrapped around Eli's belly. And in Hebrew, this idea of kabed and kabod would have been very similar when you said it. And so here you have a dead man who is heavy, whose God's glory that his sons were stealing when the sacrifices were made and taking the food and feeding themselves, God's glory is wrapped around his belly and he's dead because of that. So a significant point here that the author writes that, again, that we lose in our modern day English, and just something that I thought was was incredibly significant for what the author here is trying to say. Okay, 4 minutes, we're going to hit this. 19 through 22. Now his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant and about to give birth, and when she had heard the news that the ark of God was captured, and her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed and gave birth to for pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the woman attending her said to her, "Do not be afraid, you have borne a son." But she did not answer or pay attention, and she named the child Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel, because the ark of God has been captured, and because of her father-in-law and her husband." And she said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark has been captured." The tragedy of a nameless life. We don't even know what her name is. Clearly, though, she was somebody who was in the it circle, right? She's married to a priest. Her brother-in-law is a priest. Her father-in-law is a priest. She clearly has this fishbowl life, right? What's her husband doing by the gate that's said in earlier chapter? What's he guilty of? Adultery. So no doubt she knows the sting of what her man's doing. Was there a reconciliation? She's pregnant. He's getting ready to head off to war. And word comes back. And the most interesting thing here to me in all of this is that when the news comes back, this nameless woman doesn't say, "I'm not worried about the box, my man's dead." And yet, the thing that she's concerned about, or the thing that she said is, "The glory of the Lord is gone." We've got another birth. We've got another baby here. Interesting contrast between what takes place in chapter 1 and chapter 2 versus here. She names the baby what? Ichabod. Means the glory is gone. People said maybe she didn't know what she was talking about, or she was delirious, labor pains come on. I don't think that's the case at all. She's got the presence of mind to note that something devastating has happened to them as a people. The glory of the Lord is gone. Compare that to what we saw with Hannah. Does anybody remember what Samuel's name is? What it means? Shmuel? Anybody remember? Either the name of God or given of God. One baby born to a mother, joyous. Another baby born to a woman that we don't even know her name. And in her deepest despair, she gives him a name that nobody would want. And she died. All because God was taken out of the equation. Ralph Davis, again, remember who she's married to, right? He's a scoundrel. Ralph Davis said she probably taught more theology in her death than her husband did in his entire life. And I think that's a very astute point. Again, this class is about people. And this one, it just stuck out to me. This one, I can't imagine what this was like for her, what her life was like, and then for it to end this way. All because the nation turned away from the one true God. And this is how we see it manifested in people's lives. How it's manifested in everybody's lives. It's one family, one person at a time. We look at it in big circles. But here it is at a very granular level. Okay? And so, that's what brings us there. Now, a couple of things I'm going to breeze through chapter 5 and 6 here in about 30 seconds. If you look on here, you can see the red line of how the ark moves. I put up God 2, Dagon 0. That's in the temple. When they put the ark there, Dagon falls over. They prop him back up. He falls over again. Nobody wants the ark because people start getting tumors and people are dying. And everybody's like, let's get rid of it. It's the Hebrew God is punishing us. And so it makes this little curvy, windy road through chapters 5 and 6. People die because they look upon it, right? There's the idea, did they look in it or were they looking at it with disrespect and God punishes them? But it ends up here at Kiriath Jearim is the way that I would say it. And I think it says it's there for 20 years. Okay? And so, again, this story is not about the movement of the Ark of the Covenant. It's about the people. And so here's, if you want to take a picture of this while it's up there, this is kind of up through chapter 7 of how the Ark moved. Okay? So I actually managed to get through. Are there any questions or comments on anything? I know we breezed through that very fast, but we had to do a little catch up. Okay, I hope, my goal is that I hope you see the personal nature of the people in this book, because that's really the beauty of 1 Samuel. Not about history, it's about the story of the people and then how we identify with it. So appreciate everybody's attention and your comments. Jason will be back next Wednesday, chapters 7, 8, and maybe 9.